Tariona Paschal had only known Todd Morgan for 5 days when she stepped into his home and changed everything. What began as a seemingly innocent online connection between a quiet, respected professor and a woman with a shadowed past turned into a cold-blooded killing that shocked an entire community. Why did she do it? What really happened behind closed doors? And how could a man so loved by his family, friends, and students fall victim to such a senseless act of violence? This is not just a story of murder, it's a haunting mystery, and the answers may still be locked inside the mind of the woman who pulled the trigger. Todd Morgan had a presence that couldn't be ignored. He was one of those rare people who made others feel seen and valued. In the quiet suburb of Hudson, Ohio, Todd was a name most residents recognized, not because he was flashy or attention-seeking, but because of the quiet, consistent way he poured love into his work, his family, and his community. He was 41 years old, a professor at Cleveland State University, and known among his peers and students as someone deeply passionate about education and mentorship. His lectures were lively, his door always open, and his feedback thoughtful. Todd wasn't just teaching coursework, he was guiding lives. Students who were the first in their families to attend college found in Todd a kind of surrogate uncle or older brother. Many would say he saw potential in them before they saw it in themselves. Outside the classroom, Todd was equally committed. He had been married for over a decade and had 2 young children he adored. Photos from social media showed him coaching his son's little league team, hiking with his daughter, and taking family road trips in a well-worn SUV with a trunk full of snacks and board games. He wasn't a man of extravagance, but he was rich in what mattered. His wife, though private, often commented to friends how lucky she felt to have someone so consistent, dependable, and deeply good-hearted. His mother, Sandy Morgan, spoke about him with a mix of pride and tenderness that only a parent could possess. She often referred to him as her miracle baby, born after years of struggling with fertility, and she never missed a chance to say how proud she was of the man he became. "Todd never gave me a day of trouble," she would say. "He just loved. That was who he was." So when the news broke that Todd Morgan had been found shot to death in his own home in April of 2023, the initial reaction from neighbors and friends was complete disbelief. It didn't make sense. Todd didn't have enemies. He wasn't involved in any shady dealings. He was the kind of man people called when they needed help moving furniture, when a kid needed tutoring, or when someone just needed to vent over coffee. For something this violent, this cruel, to happen to someone like him felt like a fundamental breach in the order of the universe. The home where he was found was a modest but warm colonial-style house on a tree-lined street. It had a tire swing in the backyard and a front porch that often had a pair of rocking chairs and a folded newspaper. Police were called when a coworker grew concerned that Todd hadn't shown up for a scheduled meeting, which was highly unusual. When officers entered, they found his body alone inside. He had been shot multiple times. There were no immediate signs of forced entry, no sign of a break-in, and nothing appeared stolen. It looked as though he had let someone in, someone he trusted, or at least someone he didn't fear. As word spread through the community, grief began to ripple outward. Vigils were held. Former students posted tributes. A memorial was erected at the university where he taught. His children, confused and devastated, clung to their mother. Sandy Morgan, stricken with a sorrow no parent should ever endure, could barely speak through her tears during the first few days after the news. Why Todd? Became the question that echoed through every conversation in Hudson. Law enforcement assured the community that they were working tirelessly on the case, but the silence in those first few days was deafening. Rumors swirled. Some speculated it was a robbery gone wrong. Others wondered if Todd had some secret life no one knew about. But to those who really knew him, the idea that he could be involved in anything criminal was absurd. Todd Morgan was the very definition of safe, reliable, and kind. His death wasn't just a loss to his family. It was a crack in the foundation of the town he helped hold together. The investigation into Todd Morgan's death began under a thick cloud of confusion and grief. Detectives from the Hudson Police Department were immediately assigned to the case, aware that this wasn't just another homicide. This was a high-profile murder of a beloved community figure, and the pressure to find answers quickly was intense. Yet despite the emotional weight of the case, investigators knew they had to work methodically. Crime scene technicians combed through the house, inch by inch, collecting bullet casings, examining the entry points, and dusting for prints. Nothing appeared to have been taken, and there were no signs of forced entry, which led detectives to one unsettling conclusion. Whoever did this, Todd let them in willingly. The medical examiner later confirmed that Todd had been shot multiple times at close range. The trajectory of the bullets, the spread, the lack of a struggle, it all painted a picture of calculated violence. Whoever pulled the trigger did so with intent. There was no evidence of hesitation, no sign that it was an accident or heat-of-the-moment impulse. It was an execution, cold, deliberate, ruthless. In the early days of the investigation, police turned to Todd's digital footprint for clues. They began reviewing his phone records, emails, and social media activity. What they found was unexpected. Just days before his death, Todd had begun communicating online with a woman named Terayona Pashal. She was 32, from Cleveland, and had apparently met Todd through a dating app. Investigators were surprised. Todd was married. At least that's what everyone believed. But as they dug deeper, it became clear that Todd's marriage, though outwardly stable, had been going through private turmoil. There had been a recent separation, something few outside his immediate family knew about. According to a close friend, Todd had been lonely, vulnerable, and unsure of how to navigate life without his family under the same roof. That vulnerability may have made him susceptible to someone like Pascal. Through recovered messages and app logs, detectives learned that Todd and Pascal had started chatting online in April of 2023. Their exchanges were casual at first, friendly, flirtatious, but not explicit. Over the course of several days, the tone shifted. Pascal was charming, attentive, and made Todd feel seen at a time when he was emotionally raw. Eventually, they made plans to meet in person. Todd, always trusting, invited her to his home. It was that decision that would cost him his life. Detectives issued a subpoena for Pascal's phone and location data, and the results were damning. Her device had pinged off a cell tower near Todd's home the night he was murdered. Her text to Todd abruptly stopped the same night. There were also records of her searching terms related to gun laws and ballistics in the days leading up to their meeting. A search of Pascal's social media showed no mention of Todd, but it revealed a trail of erratic behavior. Previous posts filled with vague threats, emotional outbursts, and posts suggesting a fascination with firearms and control. This wasn't a stable woman looking for companionship. This was someone unpredictable. But the real breakthrough came when forensic analysts matched DNA from under Todd's fingernails to Pascal. It wasn't much, just a trace, but enough to confirm that she had been physically close to him that night. Ballistics further tied the bullets recovered from Todd's body to a firearm registered to a relative of Pashal, which had been reported stolen weeks prior. When police finally brought Pascal in for questioning, she was calm, eerily so. She didn't deny meeting Todd. She admitted to going to his house, but she claimed she left him alive, insisting that someone else must have come after her. Detectives weren't convinced. Her story was riddled with inconsistencies, and when confronted with the physical evidence, phone records, DNA, ballistics, her demeanor began to crack. She stopped talking, asked for an attorney, and the interview ended. But by then police had enough. Terayona Pashal was arrested and charged with aggravated murder. The community that once looked at Todd's death as a senseless tragedy finally had a name and a face behind the nightmare. But the question that lingered, the one Todd's family couldn't shake, was why? Why would she kill him? What could have possibly happened in those final moments to turn a simple meeting into a brutal murder? Only Terayona Pashal knew the truth, and she wasn't ready to tell it. News of Terayona Pascal's arrest spread rapidly through Hudson and beyond. The idea that a man like Todd Morgan, a respected professor, devoted father, and cherished member of the community, had fallen victim to such a calculated killing, stunned everyone who knew him. The tragedy didn't just shake his family, it rattled the entire city. Candlelight vigils were held outside the university where he had taught. His students, many of whom credited him for helping shape their careers, left handwritten notes and flowers on the steps of the building where he used to lecture. "He saw something in me when no one else did," one student wrote. "He made me believe I was capable of more." But while the community mourned, behind the scenes, the prosecution began building their case. Summit County Prosecutor Elliot Kulkovich knew that the evidence was solid, but he also knew the courtroom would become a battleground. Pascal had retained a defense attorney known for mounting aggressive defenses, and they hinted at a strategy that leaned heavily into psychological instability and self-defense. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on facts, cold, irrefutable, data gathered by detectives and forensic specialists. The messages exchanged between Todd and Pascal, the cell phone tower records, the recovered DNA, the ballistics, all of it pointed to only one conclusion: she was guilty. Pascal's indictment on charges of aggravated murder with a gun specification came in May 2023, just a few weeks after Todd's death. The gun specification added extra weight to the charge, increasing the severity of her potential sentence. She pleaded not guilty during her initial arraignment, and the case slowly wound its way through pre-trial hearings. Each time she appeared in court, Todd's family sat quietly in the front row, hearts heavy with pain, waiting for justice. During the pre-trial phase, more disturbing details began to surface about Pascal's past. Investigators uncovered a history of instability, failed relationships, and multiple restraining orders filed against her in other states. Though none of these incidents had escalated to violence, the pattern was clear. Pascal had a volatile temper and a habit of manipulation. Witnesses described her as charming at first, but controlling and paranoid once she felt someone was pulling away. One former acquaintance said, "She always talked about needing control. Like if she didn't have control, she felt like she was drowning." Still, even with all this background, the motive remained elusive. Why did Pascal kill Todd? Was it a robbery gone wrong? Was it personal? Did he reject her in some way that triggered a violent outburst? Prosecutors speculated, but nothing definitive emerged. Pascal herself remained silent, invoking her right not to speak on multiple occasions. Every time she was asked to explain what happened in those final minutes inside Todd's home, she simply looked down, emotionless, as if she had detached herself from the horror she had inflicted. Then, months later, an unexpected turn. On the morning of her trial, after months of insisting she was innocent, Pascal stood before the court and changed her plea. She pled guilty to aggravated murder with the gun specification. The courtroom, packed with reporters, and Todd's grieving family fell into stunned silence. There was no explanation offered, no details shared, just the cold admission of guilt and the acceptance of a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. The judge acknowledged the weight of the decision and accepted the plea deal, emphasizing that Pascal would be added to the state's violent offender registry and would face the full consequences of her actions. When asked if she had anything to say, Pascal gave only a brief, emotionless statement. "I'm very sorry, and I hope that one day you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." It was the first and only time she acknowledged Todd's family directly, but the words rang hollow. There was no explanation, no real remorse that could be felt in her voice or seen in her face. For Sandy Morgan, Todd's mother, the apology wasn't enough. She stood before the court and said through tears, "I would like to say I hope you burn in hell, but I can't because I'm a Christian. I serve a God. Todd's family deserves to know what really happened that day, if you ever find the courage to tell the truth." And with that, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence once again, as everyone came to terms with the fact that justice had been served, but the truth remained buried. Todd Morgan's funeral was held in early June, just days after the community was shaken by the shocking details of his murder. Hundreds filled the church pews, standing shoulder to shoulder, some even spilling out onto the steps and sidewalk outside. His casket, draped in a navy blue cloth that mirrored the calming tones he favored in his wardrobe, was surrounded by framed photographs of his life, a vibrant timeline of a man who had given everything to those he loved. His wife Amanda stood, with their 2 children, unable to speak through her grief as friends and colleagues shared memories of a man known for his wisdom, warmth, and unwavering kindness. His mother, Sandy, sat clutching a photograph of him as a boy, her tears never ceasing, her hands trembling with the weight of a heartbreak she knew she would never recover from. Even as the mourning continued, investigators pressed on with their efforts to piece together what had truly happened that April evening. The facts were known. Todd and Tariana had met online, exchanged messages, agreed to meet in person, and then, within days of their first in-person encounter, Todd was dead. But something deeper remained unspoken, unexamined. The mystery that haunted everyone, especially Todd's family, was what had taken place in those final moments. What was said between them? What turned what appeared to be a consensual meeting into a cold-blooded killing? Detectives revisited the digital breadcrumbs. They had recovered text messages that started with flirtation and banter, but eventually shifted to more emotionally intense exchanges. Tariana seemed to be growing increasingly possessive, sending multiple messages in a short time if Todd didn't respond quickly, asking probing questions about his whereabouts and personal life. There was no evidence he misled her. He had been open about his status as a married man and father. He wasn't looking for a relationship, just a conversation. But for Tariana, it appeared that wasn't enough. Phone records showed that Tariana had taken a rideshare to Todd's home the evening of April 17, 2023. Surveillance cameras in the neighborhood picked up her arrival. She was wearing dark clothing and carrying a small crossbody bag, later confirmed to contain the firearm used in the murder. Inside the house, the timeline became chillingly precise. Based on smart home devices, Todd had disarmed his security system at 6:42 p.m. The system detected motion in the foyer minutes later. By 6:57 p.m., his phone stopped responding. By 7:12 p.m., she was gone. Neighbors reported hearing loud noises, but nothing that immediately sounded like gunshots. One thought it was furniture being moved. Another assumed it was a television turned up too loud. No one imagined that within the quiet home of the beloved professor, a violent confrontation was unfolding. The medical examiner would later confirm that Todd had been shot 3 times, twice in the chest, once in the neck. The shots were fired at close range. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting he had been caught completely off guard. Perhaps he turned his back for a moment. Perhaps he let his guard down in what he believed was a safe, familiar environment. In the end, all the evidence painted the picture of a man who had no reason to believe he was in danger, until it was too late. As police closed in on Tariana, it became clear she had tried to cover her tracks. She deleted the app through which she and Todd had communicated. She wiped parts of her phone's history. But forensic specialists were able to recover enough to tie her to the scene. DNA on a glass in the kitchen matched her profile. Ballistics matched the shell casings found at the scene to a gun recovered during her arrest. The case against her became airtight. Yet none of this brought peace to Todd's family. His children, now fatherless, had to learn what it meant to carry on with a gaping absence in their lives. His wife, Amanda, stopped answering phone calls and avoided the media, unable to process the grief and the endless stream of questions. Why him? Why that night? Why did she pull the trigger? No one had the answer, not even Tariana Pascal. The courtroom was heavy with silence when Tariana Pascal stood to face her sentencing. It was September 18, 2024, nearly a year and a half after the brutal killing of Todd Morgan, and the time had come for the final act of justice. She had pleaded guilty to aggravated murder with a gun specification, a plea that spared the community the pain of a lengthy trial, but left many questions still unanswered. The plea meant she would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years. It also meant she would be entered permanently into the state's violent offender registry. As she stood in front of the judge, wearing a beige prison jumpsuit and shackles around her wrists and ankles, her face remained largely expressionless. Her long, straight hair had been pulled back tightly, and her eyes flickered downward as the prosecutor recounted the events of April 17, 2023. She didn't flinch when the details were read: how she had arrived at Todd's house under the guise of a friendly visit, how she had waited until his back was turned, and how she had shot him multiple times before fleeing the scene. She stood motionless even as photos of Todd, both alive and in death, were shown. But her stillness did not mask the impact of what she had done. Before the sentence was handed down, members of Todd Morgan's family were given a chance to speak. His mother, Sandy Morgan, rose slowly from her seat in the gallery, holding onto the arm of a family friend for support. Her voice trembled, but the words were sharp with pain and conviction. "I would like to say I hope you burn in hell," Sandy said, locking eyes with Pascal. "But I can't because I'm a Christian. I serve a God who commands me to forgive, even when my heart is shattered. But make no mistake, you took everything from us. My son was a father, a husband, a mentor, and you robbed the world of his light. We still don't know why you did it, and maybe we never will. But I pray one day you'll have the courage to tell the truth, because Todd's children deserve to know why their father is gone." Several people in the courtroom wiped away tears. Todd's teenage daughter buried her face in her mother's side. His son, only 11, stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, in a way that mirrored the photo of Todd hanging in their home. The pain was etched into the family's very posture, grief that had settled into their bones. When Pascal was given the opportunity to speak, she turned slightly to face them. Her voice was barely audible at first, trembling but coherent. "I'm very sorry," she said. "I hope that one day you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. I know I can't give you back what I took, but I am sorry." There was no elaboration, no explanation, no motive offered. The judge did not ask for one, and the prosecution did not press for more. Everyone in the room knew that no words could make sense of what had happened, and perhaps that was the greatest injustice of all. Not just the loss of Todd Morgan, but the total absence of reason, the hole in the story that would never be filled. As the sentence was read aloud, life in prison, parole possible after 23 years, Tariona Pascal nodded slightly. She was escorted from the courtroom without looking back. Outside the courthouse, Summit County Prosecutor Elliot Kulkovich gave a brief statement to the press. "This community is safer as a result of this sentence," he said. Todd Morgan was a beloved member of Hudson, a father, husband, professor, and friend. His absence will be felt for generations. But today, justice was served. I thank the Hudson Police Department, the assistant prosecutors, and everyone who worked tirelessly to bring this case to a close. But for Todd's family, closure was still a distant dream. They returned home to a house filled with memories and silence. His office remained untouched, books still stacked where he'd left them, papers frozen in time. His children would grow up without his steady guidance. His wife would live the rest of her life wondering why the man she loved had been taken by a stranger he barely knew. And as for Tariona Pascal, she began her life behind bars, one day bleeding into the next, each moment a reminder of the decision she made that April evening and the lives she shattered in the process.